So today we're doing Mercury and Mercury through the houses and Mercury through the signs. So if you haven't been watching the prior of Mars and Venus, I'm starting a little bit about the psychology of why this aspect of our mind develops before we go into the actual chart. So first, let's talk about Mercury and its meaning, and then there's some tricks I'll show you on the chart so you can identify your particular placement of Mercury in terms of the importance of it in your psychology. So a lot of times people think in spirituality that this idea of self-betrayal or self-deceit or low-level consciousness or limiting thoughts can be eliminated. And that's absolutely false. It is impossible. The Mercury archetype is the trickster archetype. And there's this great book called Trickster Rules the World. And it indeed does. Because no matter where you are on your spiritual path, you need a trickster archetype. You have to kind of buy in to something of the world. And you get to choose oftentimes through your house placement of Mercury and your sign placement. But the concept that we don't wear veils or we can be completely unmasked and authentic is not true. Within that, you find your way to be most authentic, especially if you've gone through a hero's journey or your spiritual experience. So where does this start? So in my philosophy and the way that I obviously explain thought is inherited at the moment of conception. But when we're looking at the reason that we would need a Mercury, lying, cheating, stealing, self-betrayal, self-deceit, delusion, illusion, why does this occur? What happens is psychologically, when you are birthed, there should be a fissure that you and mother are separate. And back in the old days, when a child was born, they would put them on the belly so that the touch to touch would indicate to the psyche of the child, there is a separateness between me and this person that just housed me for 9 months. And maybe certain places that's still done, but with C-section and things, a lot of this natural birthing has been eliminated. And that was a key part in psychological development. So removal of that, overprotection, helicopter parenting, a lot of this stuff has created this belief of a symbiosis with the mother that doesn't ever have a clear boundary that it has ended and the child's life has actually begun. Mercury rules the lungs, the breath. So if you still think you're breathing through your mother, then that can also be an area. So anytime someone has some like asthmatic or lung issue, it is directly linked to needing a separation to breathing on their own. So what happens around 2 years old, children start to lie. Usually it's the mother, and now we're more general in language in terms of caretaker, but go drink water, you're thirsty. Go pee before we go out, you're gonna need to pee. Take a jacket, you're cold. This creates in the child, how does she know? How do I get her out of my head? How do I get a separation from this person who can read my thoughts? There, the trickster is created. The sun and Mercury will always be side by side on your chart. They can never be anything but, they can be in different signs, but they're always within that 30-degree scope, and we'll show it in the charts. And then there's some tweaks as to how you particularly live it out with which one comes out of the horizon first, which I'll show you. In mythology, it's Apollo, the sun god, and Hermes, or Mercury, his brother. Within seconds of Mercury being born, he eyes Apollo's cows. He walks backwards. That's why we see Mercury retrograde 3 times a year. And he robs the cows. There is a thief. There is a stealing. There is a lying element to this archetype. Every single person has. It is not so much how we do it to others, but what we do to ourselves, the level of self-deceit. That's why being woke has to do with this awareness of self. Okay, it's trying to remove the veils that I've shown to myself in the world. And this is now allowing me to see my sun, my true nature, my divinity. That's the relationship there. Mercury, what happens is he steals all the cows of Apollo and he keeps one for himself. He's the merchant. Wherever you have him, it's the salesman, it's the merchant, it's the trickster, it's the negotiator, it's the public relations person. It's the person that can manipulate. It's the person that will go through hoops, that will get sneaky in the spaces. So by your sign in your house, this is how you're going to live out that trickster archetype, rightfully so. So he keeps one of the cows for himself and he sells off all of the other cows because he knows he's going to get in trouble. So that saying, instead of asking for permission, ask for forgiveness, is that he knew that if he put aside a cow, because he was going to need to ask for forgiveness. So Apollo goes to Zeus, his dad, they share Zeus as a father, and says, Mercury stole my cows. He gets summoned up to Olympus, and he has a platter with the cow on it in little chunks, and he bats his cute little eyelashes, and Zeus cannot get mad at him, and rather he rewards him, and he makes him the messenger of the gods. The reason that none of us can be woke fully, the reason that none of us can fully be authentic all the time is because of this archetype. Mercury, right next to the sun with his winged sandals, is constantly seeking something beyond in the upper world, what I will be, when I have, when I get, or in the past, winged sandals retrograde, what I was, what I had, what I once was. This keeps us in this ego state of never being present. So when we talk about presence, stillness, being here now, it is Mercury that you're trying to fight. And so we cannot possibly be in that state of stillness all the time ever. It's an absolute impossibility, just like removing a limiting belief or thought. Because of the relationship in the sky of Mercury covering the sun, which is our essence in our philosophy, we do not fully see ourselves. This is the concept of the mirroring. When I judge another, what is really hiding in myself, because trickster keeps me hidden. Part of it is a necessity, because in the earthly world, we need a separation from people. We need a boundary from another. We cannot be merged fully. That's codependence, unhealthy relationships. But in the spirit realm, we are one. And so the belief we are separate comes from Mercury and Mars as well, because Mars is what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, what keeps us seeking an identity that we're not enough. Mercury is the reason why. So those two work close together. If you've seen the spiritual adulting archetypal map, you'll see that Mars and Mercury are always side by side. They're hand in hand. And actually Mercury and Aries are friends. So that's actually a good placement in the chart. So that's some of the psychology and mythology of why this notion of being completely authentic or no limiting thoughts or never veiled or never in delusion is nonsense. The other thing is that this particular archetype has to do with illusion. And so this is what creates validation needs. This is what creates wanting to put people on pedestals, seeing more than what is there because you judge yourself in comparison to another. This is where Mercury and Mars also kind of work together with that ego and never really realizing that I am enough. Any questions on the psychology or mythology of this? Okay, so let me show you. If you have the app, let me go to share screen. If you have the app, you're going to want to.
You mean AstroGold?
Yeah, you could do it on AstroGold, or this is the computer version, the Solar Fire. So you're going to go to dynamic, you see this, and you're going to go to animate chart. So this is my chart. It's animate because it's live. I can move it here minute by minute by minute. So you're going to go to minutes or hours. My Mercury is down here. Obviously, you could visually see that because mine is a night chart, it's down here. If I start moving the placement of Mercury, obviously Mercury is going to come out of the horizon first. My chart is pretty easy to see that. And I'll show you guys on yours. So let me go to hours just because it's going to be fast. You see how Mercury is moving? This is the same day of my chart. So you see, I was born at midnight. This is about 5 a.m. And Mercury is going to cross the horizon first. So people that have Mercury crossing the horizon first have an added extra layer of illusion and delusion and fantasy. When your sun rises first beyond the horizon, there's a little bit of clarity. Mind you, these are extremely minute details, okay? But depending on what you're looking at, what you want to know, like a Mercury retrograde or things like that, in the bigger picture, it can mean something. If your Mercury is retrograde when you're born, that's also, and I'll show you a little trick there. It's a little advanced, but I'll show you. So let me just go back to, well, this is 12/12. I'm born with Mercury retrograde. You want to see, you can go to dynamic, you can go to tri-wheel, and this is my birth chart. I can check and see when Mercury went direct. These things will tell you how you navigate your mind, how your process is, how you brood or you stay kind of in the past before you go direct. Some people have a direct chart, and you can go to this chart and you can see that the next day after birth or hours after birth, it hit retrograde. So this is more advanced, and we'll see this in level 4, but you can always see in your chart, and you could always go to that animate chart or in this case, tri chart, and I can go to where the Mercury, where's my Mercury? Over here. How it is in that moment, and if it's going direct. It's in Aries. You go to your birthday, and we could do each of you if you want. So here's at 22 degrees, I can go days after my birth. Oh, it was in retrograde probably for a while. So meaning that my decision-making process or the capacity of my mind to stay stuck or brood is probably inherent already in my personality. Sometimes you see somebody that has a direct or a retrograde in the day after birth or hours after birth, it changes the opposite way, and it tells you why they're a certain way. So those, again, are like minute sort of details. So let's look at Abby's. And you're going to go to animate chart. So Abby, yours is in the 10th. So I'm going to go to hours. And for you, I'm going to go backwards. In mine, because I was at the 4th house, I went to the horizon. For you, I just went backwards. So your sun came out of the horizon around 7:30. Here's 8:14. And Mercury came after, substantially later, and also in another sign, which I'll talk about. Jen, let's do yours. And you have a little video on this as well. Okay, you could already see that yours Mercury came out first because your sun is touching the ascendant. So you know that yours was already your Mercury first. So when the Mercury comes out first, there's like a little layer of more delusion or more attachment to the veil of Mercury than if your sun, again, very small. So for the two of you, both of you have Mercury, Jen, you have Mercury in Sag and Sun in Capricorn. Abby, you have your sun in Libra and your Mercury in Scorpio. I have my sun and my Mercury in the same sign. You can only have one sign difference. It can never, ever be opposition, a square. That relationship cannot exist with the sun and the Mercury. So when there's a difference between the sun sign and the Mercury sign, there could be a little bit of being at odds with your nature. So Jen, in your case, being that your sun is in Capricorn, plus Mercury coming out first, you're going to be more attached to the veil of the Mercury in Sag than the sun in Capricorn. So I'll have, it's almost like a scoreboard, if you a thing. And again, these are very, very small things. So if you have them in the same sign, that's ideal. If you have them in the same sign and sun comes out first in the horizon, that's even more ideal. If you have them in different signs like Abby, but the sun comes out first, that's technically a better placement. And again, better very, very loosely. I don't like those words. Any questions about that? Those are very, very small tweaks about how a person might live out the relationship between their trickster archetype, the delusion, the illusion, and their identity or their authenticity. The other thing about Mercury has to do with low level consciousness. In your video, every video, you have the 4 states of consciousness and you have the levels of consciousness sheet. Mercury always has to be associated with the low level consciousness because it's linked to the mind. So in creation, we all come from, let's just say, the Akash or the ether, the universal consciousness. The moment something has a thought attached to it, it is already considered limited. Thought inherently is limited. So all Mercuries inherently are limited. And because the Mercury and the sun are always side by side, they're brothers, our essence is always limited. Therefore, low level consciousness can never, ever, ever be eradicated. Another falseness in this new age. That's why we need limiting thinking, and we will always have limiting thinking. The goal of a spiritual path is that you breathe a little bit more, or you broaden your perspective around your limitation, not that it's eradicated. So this is low level consciousness that's absolutely needed, and why the trickster rules the world. So in that sheet, those rock and water, first 2 levels of consciousness are always linked to Mercury or low level consciousness, and that can never be eradicated. So you always start your particular Mercury in your sign with the lowest version of those animals that are listed. Let me just show you the sheet in case you don't know which one I'm talking about. And you have a video in each one. So Abby, your Mercury's in Scorpio. You're going to start with the way you're going to begin living out the Mercury will be through Scorpio in terms of consciousness. Then you evolve to serpent, hopefully to phoenix, and then eventually to eagle, which is a complete shift in perspective. Genders will be more of the donkey, so think of the stubbornness, then more of the horse, then the centaur, which is sort of the midpoint between animal and human, and then hopefully eventually, again, rising consciousness, Pegasus that flies. So we all start off, mine is the piranha, then I grow to the fish, hopefully the mermaid, and eventually the fisherman. So consciousness is always animal nature. Low consciousness is always linked to our animal nature. That's why this obsession with being special or not human is the antithesis of all things spiritual. And astrology, every single sign starts off with animals. Virgo has the wheat or the great mother, and Libra has the scales. Those are the 2 exceptions, if you will. But we see animals throughout the zodiac because we are animals. We have an animal nature. And Mercury being the illusion, the delusion, the low-level consciousness, all of us, no matter what our sign, starts off with this first column. And hopefully, as Mercury goes through the zodiac and we get older, we move through consciousness and raise consciousness around. So Mercury goes retrograde about 3 times a year. It usually starts off in one sign, goes into the previous sign. We work things that are about 7 to 8 years old, and then we move in with a plan. And then when it goes direct, we implement a plan. So retrograde, yes, your computers break, yes, flights get canceled, but the real essence is to start to work that low level consciousness. So you can go back, you can see how you have revenge, or you plot, or you're betrayed, or you self-deceive, and then move into consciousness, raise consciousness, and then this happens 3 times a year. So it's a very, very important archetype. Any questions? Okay. So let's go through the signs in the houses. I'm just going to share. Did I share that? Okay. Well, let's start with the first house. So wherever you have Mercury, you're going to have a facility of communication, of ease, of manipulativeness. It's a teacher archetype. It's a public relations archetype. It's a merchant archetype. So you're going to have that. Think of like getting into sneaky spaces. That person naturally is in that area of their life, going to be able to kind of get into those spaces easier. And then they're going to do it through their sign. But the house in which you have Mercury is going to be where you have that ease. Now, sometimes, like in Jen's chart, her sun is in one house and her Mercury is another. So again, we want to see how many of these sort of layers we're working through. So if they're in the same sign, that's one less layer. If the Mercury comes out second, that's one less layer. If they're in separate houses, that's one less layer. So obviously this adds up in the form of how the person communicates internally with their own mind, depending on how much of this they carry in their chart. And again, those are very minute differences. Everybody has the general meaning of it. So Mercury in the first, so Mercury or a Gemini ascendant, the tendency, and if you ever saw Percy Jackson, Mercury's son, who gives the winged sandals to Perseus, he's tall, he's skinny, he's blonde. That is a typical Gemini first house and a typical, or Mercury first house, typical Gemini ascendant. Tall, thin, often blonde, or a very youthful appearance. Also, wherever you have Mercury, you tend to maintain youth. There's an immaturity. There is an innocence, not because it's an innocence like Neptune that wants to be innocent. It's just like you think you have all the answers. You think you're manipulating. You think you're ahead of the game, but you get played in the manipulation too. So there's a youthfulness around there. But physically in the first house, people tend to have that youthful nature. They're very thin, or they're playful, they're childlike. That's a Mercury in the first. Mercury in the second. Merchant is the name of the game. You can make money doing anything. You can sell a pencil. You can sell ice to an Eskimo. It's a very, very great place for making money. Values are shady. Mercury in the second is difficult in terms of identifying a value system, sticking to it. You kind of want to flit and float wherever the wind takes you, oftentimes seeking the money or seeking possessions, and you will violate and self-betray to honor that. Mercury in the third, pretty natural placement for teachers, especially school teachers, K through 12, not only because the third house is K through 12, but also the innocence, the young children, the playful nature. This is probably the person who does the neighborhood watch. They know they're the town gossip. They're the ones that maybe are the youth or the youngest child in the sibling relationships, but very good communicators, very good at sales pitches, at public relations. I have a client who has Mercury in the third. I think it might be in Capricorn. I can't remember, but she's a high school principal, very well placed. Mercury in the fourth. The home environment is important, and you could be like a really good teacher to your children, or there's a teaching nature in your home. Maybe you have your school out of your home, like a homeschool. that kind of experience in the home life. Also, you can work not only out of your home, but your work can be, or your money making abilities can be through domestic activities. Mercury in the 5th, you will probably have a child that's like an eternal child. They stay with you forever. They take care of you forever. They might have, you know, a desire to be in the family business with you, but there tends to be a relationship with that child that's very, very close, and tends to stay with you. They not necessarily want to grow up. Another thing with Mercury is androgynous. So where you have this, depending if it's a relationship house or a child house, or certain, even in your own first house, there might be like an androgynous type of nature in terms of what you're attracted to with friends or relationships or your own sexuality. That's another layer of the Mercury. The 6th house, people, and again, similar to the 2nd house, very good on the PR at work, very versatile in their jobs. They might not stay in jobs long term, because Mercury has a tendency to flit and float and want to hop around, but they are very good for what they do, and then they might leave to the next job. Their day-to-day life, in terms of their routine, their health, their day-to-day has to be constantly provoked and active. That's another thing with wherever you have Mercury, no matter where the sign. You need a constant mental stimulation in that house. That's another reason why a lot of times a Mercury in the 6th will not stay put in a job for many years. Mercury in the 6th and somewhat Mercury in the 1st, ADD, anxiety, Parkinson's, nervous disorders, very strong placement for that. Depends what's afflicting, that's level 2 word, the afflicting the planet when we do aspects. But just by nature of having Mercury in the 6th, there's a tendency to an ADD, to a central nervous system, a Parkinson's, maybe over caffeinated, seeking a stimulant. They need that kind of nature to feel alive and active. In the 7th, it could be again that you have attraction to both genders in your relationships, maybe working or having friends with sexual fluidity. You can work again in public relations, or be sort of like the communicator of all the friends, or the one that that creates all the plans for everyone to go out. They all meet at your place, or you know, you plan the vacation, everyone sends you the money. That type of agility in the friendship department or in the lover department. Mercury in the 8th can also be sexually attracted to different genders, but it's a very, very psychic placement, no matter the sign. If it's in a water sign, even more. One of the things that you'll start learning in level 2, when we start to do conjunctions, Mercury and the black moon have a very, very strong affinity, because the black moon is the prostitute archetype that's on the outskirts of society. And Mercury is like the negotiator, but the black market kind of negotiator. So when the two of those get together, or in a Scorpio ruled house, black moon and Pluto, you start to see a very strong either attraction to things that are beyond the norm, like people that work on the outskirts, or drawn to sexual practices that are, you know, atypical, let's say, or there's a very, very strong nature, psychic nature. And that same thing goes with the 12th. So Jen, you have that, and we'll talk about that in Sag in a minute. Mercury in the 9th placement for teacher, college professor, someone digital nomad, living abroad, reading 10 books at once. One of the words of Gemini, even though it's a dual sign, think of multiplicity. Gemini is the sign, and Mercury as its ruler is, I need a way out. I need an escape plan. So they might seem to be going down a natural projection or trajectory of where they are in that house, but they always need something on the side. This is one of the signs, all air signs are like that, but specifically Gemini and Mercury as its planet, that need to be dispersed. All air signs have a quality that they don't want to be caught, right? You can't hold air. But Gemini of the three is the trickiest, is the most slippery. And so there's a very strong intellectual component, especially if it's the ninth and if it's in Gemini, more so than not. So there could be like a teaching ability. Ninth house is higher education, college and beyond. They can have a platform, they can have a really big social media presence. They have the ability to move around, but you're always going to feel wherever you have Mercury that you can't exactly grasp that person in that house, in that space. It feels like elusive, like the air element kind of slips through you. That's why there's so much delusion. And where you have Gemini by the cusp, and with the house that you have Mercury is where you're going to have your enemies, where you're going to have betrayal, where you're going to have deceit just by nature, because those signs related attract that. And if you identify a mirror to it, then that's going to show that it's just that aspect of you that you haven't really gotten clarity around because it's low level consciousness. The 10th, Mercury in the 10th, put them on stage, put them in front of a TV show, put them to sell. These people can sell you absolutely anything. And if they have a presence, like on the 10th, which is more of like a stage, a public persona, absolutely. They also have a youthful appearance, Mercury in the 10th. They never look like they're getting old, like Nicole. Nicole has this in Cancer. We'll talk about the sign in a minute. This is going to be a very, very youthful appearance forever. And she does. She's like has stunning skin and just looks very young. And then next to Jupiter, that's already like the eternal sun, in the sense that he dethroned his father and he stayed in reign. This placement here gives a lot of youth and a platform for people to listen. The 11th, social connector, public relations person. Again, whether it's social media, whether it's someone that runs a political campaign, they're the connector. And that's another word of Mercury, is that they're the ones connecting the dots, putting people together. They might connect you and then go off to their next activity, but they're the ones that are kind of seeing the potentiality of who matches with who in that sector of their chart. And then Mercury in the 12th, and you have this, Jen, is a very, very psychic nature. So anytime Mercury's in the 4th, the 8th and the 12th, more the 8th and the 12th, you're going to have a very psychic capacity. The 12th house is an interesting placement because the 12th house is also a house of enemies. And so if you have some delusion because of the nature of Mercury around your enemies, you may not realize somebody is not a friend until they betray you. So that's a placement that could be very tricky or it could be you, right? It goes both ways. So that's a tricky placement. Anything in the 12th is going to be tricky because you don't really have so much clarity around the manipulation or the delusion or the veils that you wear, especially if it's in Sagittarius. You might think it's further from you than it really is, but we'll talk about the signs in a minute. Any questions about the house where Mercury is found? Another thing is, remember, there's always a relationship between the cusp where you have Gemini and the ruler, which is Mercury. There is a relationship. So in Jenny, in your case, there's going to be a relationship between the 6th house and the 12th house. In my chart, there's going to be a relationship between the 7th house and the 4th house, which I have lived to the T. So let's look at Abby. Abby, okay, so Abby has, right, her chart's intercepted. So you have actually in 2 houses, you're going to have a relationship between the 6th house cusp and the 7th house cusp because you have an intercept. and then the 10th. So for someone like Abby and for myself, the first marriage, in astrology, marriage has nothing to do with signing a paper, it has to do with children. So if you choose to have children and you have the cusp of the 7th in Gemini, you go to your Mercury and you can see where is the best place to meet your partner. In this case, it's 10th, so professional environments would be very positive. And you can do that with any cusp on the 7th. We just happen to be talking about Gemini. The relationship of the cusp with the ruler of that sign is always going to speak to something. So work and marriage and close friends are going to be linked directly to the Mercury in the 10th. Any questions about Mercury through the houses? Okay, and Nicole did ask me to point out hers. I think I already did, but let me just see where her. Okay, so Nicole has not only Gemini on the midheaven, her Mercury is also in the 10th. So that's a very, very strong relationship for a Mercury, for professional persona, a stage, a public image, having some message to spread, an authority, as it's ruled by Capricorn. So that's a really nice one. So let's go through the signs. I'm trying to think. Who I have for Aries. I can't think of anybody that I have for Aries. So Mercury and Aries, Gemini. So just for a moment, Mercury being Gemini and Aries get along very, very well. In our psyche, both Mercury or Gemini and Aries or Mars have a distinct function, and that's why they get along. They have a distinct function in honoring the ego and having you forget your true essence and having you chase things that are going to supposedly make you feel better. So if I have more money, if I have more sex, if I have more things, if I have more fill in the blank. So they work well together. A Mercury in Aries loves to be there because if you're already smart, you're already quick, it's the way you think, it's the way your mind works, it's the way you communicate. In the sign of I am, it's going to be a bit narcissistic. It's going to be very self-centered. It's going to be all about me. I am, and I have my mind that works that fast. Those people are going to be powerhouses with their thoughts. So Mercury rules the rational mind. Mercury rules communication. Mercury is the way you have your mind speed. So the fire signs and the air signs are the best. Those are the best Mercuries in terms of rapidity of getting information, of spitting it out, of having ideas, of implementing them, of connecting dots. Those people, their minds are a mile a minute, super fast. Jen, you hear yourself there because you're brilliant. I, on the other hand, I have a Mercury in water. So woo, the water signs are emotion. We process all intellect through emotion. And anytime I process anything, there is an emotional reaction to it. And then I get the message. And sorry, but the worst Mercuries are the Earth, specifically Virgo. Mercury in Virgo is the most closed-minded. Mercury in Taurus is second. Mercury in Capricorn isn't a bad placement. It's actually a really strong placement, but it could be very, very rigid. Remember, low vibration, low level consciousness. So again, these are very general things. It has to do with what's aspecting, what house, what sign, you know, but in general, the air Mercuries and the fire Mercuries are on the ball. Like they just see stuff so freaking fast. It's crazy. Water, very emotional. You can't speak to a Mercury in a water sign without addressing some emotional component. They're not going to hear you. And then the earth signs are the most stubborn. They're very stuck. Mercury's a very fast sign, and earth is just an element that just goes slow. It's the slowest of all of the elements. So to think that an earth sign in a Mercury is going to be fast is just delusional. Capricorn of those three is the best, especially if it's related to ambition, to money, to a plan, to a structure. Yes. but the worst Mercury you're going to get is Cancer, lives in the past, no clue of the present, revenge and memories from centuries ago, and Virgo. They're Cancer and Virgo signs are very, very similar. So you're going to see a lot of times I mention those together, they overlap. But of the water signs, Cancer, the worst one, it's all about memory and past and tradition, and they'll stay with their family home until they're 80 years old. Like it's a very backwards, and especially if it's retrograde. If they're born with a retrograde Mercury, forget it. And then Virgo is the most closed-minded and slow to change in this respect, even more so than Taurus, which is slow. Taurus. So a Mercury in Taurus is going to be, it's going to have a tendency to know what they know and be comfortable in what they know. So they might get very, very quick. Let's say real estate. Taurus is a real estate sign in doing what they know in a certain zip code, but they're probably not going to branch out. So don't think just because it's a winged sandal that there's movement and an ease of movement. Taurus is going to be really the teaching there. Of how they're going to move those winged sandals. And it's going to be what they know, safe, comfort, one zip code, or the spaces in which they know they can be guaranteed something. There's a lot of laziness in Taurus as a sign, so it's not going to necessarily venture out of its comfort zone. Mercury in Gemini. So quick. The two quickest Mercuries. My personal favorite is Mercury in Aquarius. Mercury in Aquarius to me is the best Mercury there is. Those people are intuitive, they're logical, they're on it, they're fast, they're curious. They may lack follow through, so you have to see how much earth there is in a chart, but they have a logic and an intuition that's like no other. And if you have that in the 8th, oh my God, you are born psychic. Gemini Mercury is great, but there's a very, very strong tendency to lie and cheat and steal like no other. So it's a very, very slippery in what they deem the truth. Unless there are some hard aspects in the chart of boundaries and honesty and strong value system, that's a very slippery. They believe everything they sell. Mercury in Cancer is past. They're stuck in the past. So Nicole, I think we said that you had that. So make sure that, and it's next to Jupiter in your particular case, which just expands anything that Jupiter is touching. And we'll see that in aspects in level 2. But because all of this is in Cancer, there's going to be a tendency to perhaps always seek the path that's known, that's tradition, that's family, that you know exactly what to expect from. And there is also that watery nature, but really a Mercury in Cancer is much more about the past and tradition and what's comfortable, similar to a Taurus. You're going to see Taurus, Virgo, and Cancer very similar in the way that they express a lot of placements. Leo. Mercury in Leo is great. It's a great aspect. The problem with Mercury is that Leo, because Leo is very prideful, because Leo wants to be on top, they play it safe. It's almost the antithesis of what people think. Aries takes more risks. Even Sagittarius takes more risks. But of the fire signs, even though the mind is very quick, they have a natural self-doubt, a natural questioning. They have to check it 3 times because they don't trust. So that fire ability, and especially if it's hard aspect or in a bad house, is not going to work for them. It's not that they're not bright. It's just that they have a lot of self-doubt and they're so afraid of falling from here to here that they play it safe. Leo is just one of those signs that has so much potential to be burn down the house or just be super fearful. Aries and Sag have more risk-taking than Leo. Virgo. Mercury in Virgo. I think I have a chart of somebody who has like a lot. Let's see. It's the most closed-minded of Oh no, her Mercury's in Leo. She's got all this other stuff in Virgo. Mercury in Virgo, if Mercury wants to move so fast and furious, and Virgo is just so antiquated, it has to be perfect. There's so much judgment, there's so much critical. You can see that the mind there doesn't allow for like a wider range of possibility. It has to be black and white and judgmental and critical and perfect and OCD. And unless everything is perfect, so you could see that a planet that could be so potentially strong for someone, if it's in Virgo, holds them back. They're not able to get out of their own way. And you're never going to have perfection with Mercury. First of all, because Mercury by nature is lie, cheat, steal. It's deceit and betrayal. And so if you use the idea of it has to be perfect before, then you're just in a total self-denial and self-deceit about something that is impossible. Anything to do with low consciousness has to do with the earthly consciousness, has to do with the body, can never be perfect. That's why the earth and the water signs, naturally just being of negative polarity that are related to earth consciousness, are the less best of the Mercuries. The air and the fire signs have some spiritual masculine polarity component that make the low consciousness and the high consciousness flow better in a person's essence. So the Virgo one is just, it's so much perfection around something that is so imperfect. So now that's a person you might want as a project manager or as a supervisor that's going to sign off on that everything is perfect in a construction project. There's a placement for these people, but it's not ease, it's not flow. That's not going to be the word. Libra, that's a really good placement because you've got the quickness of Mercury, you've got the intelligence of Mercury, but you have the social skills and the graces of a Libra. So that's a very powerful placement. That in the 7th, I mean, talk about fundraising, talk about, having you write $1 million check for a fund, like that's a really great placement. In the 10th as well. Those placements are amazing, the air placements, because especially in Libra, it's all about the social graces, the charming nature, but they've got the wit of their mind to how to manipulate you, to kind of stroke you and please you with the social graces of what you want to hear. So you feel, I don't know if Bill Clinton has that. I'd be curious to see if I have his chart, but they always say about Bill Clinton that he makes you feel like the only one in the room. That would be an example. I don't know if I have his chart, and I don't even know if he has that, but that's kind of the essence of his chart. No, it's in Leo. Okay. But look at all the Libra that he has in the first. It has to be like he has that Libra nature. That's just like, if someone says he makes you feel like the only one in the room, that is always a Libra. And he kind of encompasses that. So that's like the Mercury in Libra. Mercury and Scorpio. Mercury and Scorpio, they should be the CSI, the forensics, the investigators, the detectives. Abby has that, and she has it in the 10th. This is someone who has such a capacity. Now, remember, Mercury is the only god who is allowed to go to the upper world and the lower world. The upper world is Sagittarius and the lower world is Scorpio. So interesting with the two of you, what you have. In such a public house, not that it's ruled by Sag, it's ruled by Capricorn, but in such a public house, Abby, you have the depths of the underworld. And Jen, in the depths of the underworld, you have such a public sign. So it's interesting that both of you can use both facets of going up and going down in both of your placements. It's an interesting observation. So in the professional house, it's so public. The 10th, there's a real ability to go deep and dark and allow people to be comfortable with that. Because that's the thing. People like Mercury. People are attracted to Mercury. It's money, it's merchant, it's sales, it's exciting, it's passion, it's all of the excitement that people want. So in Abby's case, if she's able to bring depth and darkness or shadow things to an open forum, that's a conversation waiting to happen. That's really great. Another thing about Mercury in Scorpio, and I will throw my daughter out now. She has it in the first. Is that Scorpio thinks that people are possessions. So here's the, oh no, hers is in Libra. Yeah, I thought it was in Scorpio. My bad, Sophia. She's definitely that PR person that makes you feel like you're the only one in the room. So that would be Abby. For some reason, I thought you guys had the same Venus and Mercury. This is the possession piece. So Mercury could be very possessive. It could be very jealous. It could be very envious. It has like almost like for a planet that is so free floating and allowed to kind of just spread its wings in that sign, it could believe it could hold on to something. And again, that's a water quality. The water quality of all Mercury's, mine, hers, is believing that you can hold on to something. And that's why the emotions are always high. Any Mercury has a high emotional state because all thought, all limiting beliefs are linked to an emotional expression. Next is Sag. So this is an amazing placement, no matter where it is, because if one of it's the only god that's allowed to go to the upper world and the underworld. So just of the nature of the mind, you can go future, you can go past. We're talking ego, but in a fire, it's so fast. So that's like your whiteboard, your planning. You can see everything in a plan in 5 seconds and nobody can keep up. That rapidity of your mind is phenomenal. With that, and then add it to the 12th that you have that sort of psychic sixth sense is a really great placement. These people live very well abroad. They devour books. They are philosophers. They just have a network of people everywhere. I know I'm describing you because you happen to be all those things, but I'm just talking about the placement. It just happens to be that you're amazing and you have all those things going on. But that is you in a nutshell. So you own that. I mean, it doesn't hurt that you have 16 planets in Sagittarius, but really Mercury and Sag is all of that. But yet it's in the 12th, so you have such depth, right? You're not a shallow person at all. And Sag tends to be very shallow because it just hops around, but you don't have it because you've got the 12th where it really anchors you into depth, and you're an amazing friend, and you get the depth of whatever the experience is that you're experiencing. So that's a really nice placement with that. Mercury in Capricorn. So of the earth, it is the best. So just from a creation, let's just go in order of creation. First element of creation is air. Second element of creation is fire. Third element of creation is water. Fourth element of creation is earth. That's going to be the benefit or the best of the best in the order. So the air sign's the best, fire second best, water third. And I don't like to say best, but you know, if we're trying to categorize something, and then least the earth. Because if a placement is so quick, like Mercury, in a placement of an earth sign that's so slow, you could see that inherent in it, it just doesn't flow. But Capricorn, depending on where it is, but Capricorn of the 3 earths is going to be the best, and it's going to be for ambition. That's the advantage of, let's say, a Mercury in Aries versus a Mercury in Capricorn. A Mercury in Aries is super quick, can start something, but you never know if it's going to finish it. A Mercury in Capricorn will finish everything it starts. So that's the benefit. So you have to see it from both sides. It might be a little slower, and it might be very definitive in the areas that it's going to succeed in, but it will succeed. Not a Mercury in Capricorn will never not succeed in what it starts. The best placement of all placements of all Mercuries by far is Mercury in Aquarius, because you have the intuitive. So I was talking about the 4 elements of creation. The 5th element of creation, which is air, space, ether, the only place you're really going to see it in the chart is in Aquarius. And I don't like to say that because it's an air sign, but if you have to assign the Akash or the ether to something in astrology, it's going to be Uranus and it's going to be Aquarius. So if you've got the air element of Mercury with the Akash, you can imagine those people reading the record, psychic ability, quick ideas, intuitive hits that are like downloads. But if there's no earth in the chart for the follow through, then the idea just stays in the ether. So again, you always have to see the holistic nature of the person in the chart. We're just itemizing for the purpose of class. And Mercury in Pisces, and I have Mercury in Pisces, and I love my Mercury in Pisces, is really good for these themes. But there's such depth that if I don't get to the depths of the depths of the depths of something, then I'll never finish. And then you're not on to the next thing. And that can get in your way because not everything needs to go so deep. Things are allowed to be superficial and shallow and just light and bright, but don't tell that to a Mercury in Pisces, especially someone with the fourth house. So it's one of those, just like Mercury in Cancer wants to be in the past and bring it up and look at all of it in the ancestry and what is. The Mercury in Pisces wants to go to the depths of everything, like the Scorpio wants to go to the dark and the shadow and the depths of things. And so not everything warrants going so deep. Mercury is shallow. Mercury is surface. Mercury is not going to give you any depth whatsoever. The most depth you're going to get with Mercury is in Scorpio and in Pisces. So if you want deep, you can call on Abby and me. But for the most part, it's going to be more superficial. And that's okay. That's the nature of it. And we need that light and bright, playful nature. So those are the signs. Any questions? No? Okay. Give me 1 second. Make a shout out to Sharon. Oh, I knew it. Sharon has, in my personal opinion, the best placement in Mercury. It's in Aquarius and it's in the 3rd. And she was a teacher for many, many years. But that sort of like brilliant spark, streak of intuition, and not only just by Mercury in Aquarius, but now in the 3rd house of the mind, of teaching of K through 12. I mean, that's just a very strong placement for a bright, especially a teacher. So that placement was good. Okay, so I will, next week is Memorial Day, so we will not have class, and we will post this video to the class and to the YouTube. Any questions? Is Abby still on? Any questions? No?
No questions. I will put the, oh, there she is. I will put the recording today on LMS because I know Nicole might want to see it quite quickly.
Yeah, I'll send it to you now and I'll update it to the YouTube. Abby, I didn't hear you. I'm sorry. Did you say you had a question?
No, I don't have any questions.
Okay.
I'm okay. Yeah, I am going to revisit the Mercury unit though. I think I need to like.
It's such an important placement in our chart because especially when we're following like spiritual traditions, right? We think it's about accessing the sun, and it is. In our Western philosophy, it is about that authentic light nature that we're working towards. We start at the moon, and hopefully we end up at the sun, which is our rational mind, our essence, and our identity. But the nature of the sun is that the Mercury is always there. And so one of the things that I say to people that I work with, like on the hero's journey, or if I use the Odyssey as a map, I talk about the last part of the spiritual journey, the choose your own adventure. That's where Mercury really comes in. Mercury is, now that I've identified my essence, my authenticity, I've stripped myself of temporarily an ego death. Now when I rebuild, who am I going to be when I grow up? That's your Mercury. That's the answer to who you're going to be with when you grow up. You need Mars because you need an ego. You need a veil of who you're going to be. And then Venus is the next planet. Remember, these are all the personal planets, which is the way that you're going to open your heart, perhaps in service, and to whom. So those three really, at an esoteric astrology level, really work together. But first, as we're deconstructing ourselves to figure out, Mercury is so, so important. This idea that we're not going to have limited thinking or a lower consciousness. No, and that's why Mercury is always next to the sun. So I talk a lot about that in that section. And if you have any questions, of course, just reach out. You have a question, Jen?
Just when we stop the recording, if you can both stay on for a second.
Sure. Okay, I'm going to stop.